The capture. In the bustling spaceport of New Alexandria, 12-year-old Zara Matthews blended seamlessly into the crowd. Her bright eyes darted from ship to ship, taking in every detail of the diverse alien vessels docked in the sprawling terminal. To any observer, she appeared to be nothing more than an excited child, perhaps on her first interstellar trip. In reality, Zara was far from ordinary. Beneath her seemingly fragile exterior lay a cutting-edge biomechanical frame, a marvel of human engineering. She was a Model X10 Hunter Killer, the latest creation of Earth's covert defense program. Her mission: to infiltrate and dismantle the notorious galactic slave trade that had been plaguing human colonies for decades. As Zara made her way through the spaceport, her enhanced senses picked up snippets of conversations in various alien languages. Her internal processes effortlessly translated and analyzed each exchange, searching for any information related to her mission. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near one of the docking bays. A group of Zorn, a reptilian species known for their brutality, had cornered a family of human colonists. Zara's combat subroutines activated, but she forcibly suppressed them. Her primary directive was clear: maintain cover at all costs. Instead, she edged closer to the scene, feigning the curiosity of a typical child. The Zorn, towering over the terrified humans, barked orders in their guttural language. Zara's translation software worked overtime. You dare trespass on Zorn territory. The penalty is enslavement. The human father, a weathered man with desperation in his eyes, pleaded, Please, we're just passing through. We have the proper transit visas. The lead Zorn, a scarred behemoth with cybernetic implants, sneered. Visas? Ha, those mean nothing here. Your property now. As the Zorn began to restrain the family, Zara made her move. She stumbled forward, intentionally bumping into one of the aliens. Oh, I'm sorry, mister, she squeaked, her voice perfectly mimicking a scared child's. The Zorn spun around, his reptilian eyes narrowing as they fixed on Zara. What's this? Another little human wandering where it doesn't belong. Zara backed away, her eyes wide with manufactured fear. I'm lost. Have you seen my parents? The lead Zorn's scarred face split into a cruel grin. Well, looks like we got ourselves a bonus. He reached out with a clawed hand, gripping Zara's arm tightly. Zara allowed herself to be manhandled, suppressing every combat instinct in her programming. As the Zorn dragged her along with the captured family, she caught the eye of the human father. The guilt and sorrow in his gaze were palpable, but Zara knew she couldn't break character. The group was hustled through a series of back corridors, away from the main concourse. Zara's internal mapping system tracked every turn, every security checkpoint they passed. She was building a comprehensive layout of the spaceport's restricted areas, invaluable intelligence for future operations. Finally, they arrived at a nondescript cargo bay. Inside, a sleek black ship waited, its hull adorned with strange, pulsating symbols. Zara's database identified it as a Shadowmist-class stealth transport, favored by slavers for its ability to slip past most detection systems. As they were roughly shoved into a holding cell within the ship, Zara heard the human mother whisper to her children, "Be brave, little ones. Someone will come for us." If only they knew, Zara thought, that their rescue was already underway. The cell door slammed shut, and Zara felt the telltale vibrations of the ship's engines powering up. She huddled in a corner, maintaining her frightened facade while her systems worked tirelessly. Every word spoken by the Zorn crew, every piece of equipment she could see, all of it was meticulously logged and analyzed. As the Shadowmist lifted off, leaving New Alexandria behind, Zara allowed herself a small, hidden smile. Phase 1 of her mission was complete. She was in. The journey through hyperspace was a harrowing experience for the human captives. The Zorn guards took pleasure in tormenting their prisoners, particularly delighting in frightening the children. Zara, playing her part to perfection, whimpered and cried along with the others. Days blended together in the cramped, dimly lit cell. Zora's internal chronometer tracked the passage of time precisely, but to maintain her cover, she appeared just as disoriented as her fellow captives. She learned their names, the Reeves family, John, Maria, and their children, Ethan and Lily. On the 5th day of their captivity, the ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. The cell door slid open, and the scarred Zorn leader stomped in, flanked by 2 guards. "Welcome to your new home, humans," he growled, his voice dripping with malice. "Welcome to Carxis Prime." As they were herded out of the cell, Zara got her first glimpse of the Slaver's stronghold. A massive space station hung in orbit around a desolate, rust-colored planet. Its twisted architecture was a nightmarish blend of various alien designs, a physical representation of the diverse and cruel coalition that made up the galactic slave trade. Zara stumbled intentionally as they were marched toward a docking port, allowing one of the guards to roughly grab her arm. The contact gave her the opportunity to plant a microscopic tracking device on the Zorn's armor, another small victory in her covert mission. As they entered the station, the full scale of the operation became apparent. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of captives from dozens of species filled massive holding areas. The cacophony of alien languages, punctuated by the crack of energy whips and the hum of force fields, was overwhelming. The Reeves family huddled together, terror evident on their faces. John, a father, tried to put on a brave front for his children, but Zara could see the hopelessness in his eyes. She wished she could tell them that help was coming, that she was more than she appeared, but her mission parameters were clear. Absolute secrecy was paramount. They were led to a processing area, where other newly arrived captives were being sorted and categorized. Alien devices scanned them, and harsh voices barked orders in a multitude of languages. Zora's systems worked overtime, recording everything, building a comprehensive database of the Slaver's operations. As they approached the front of the line, Zara noticed a group of particularly well-dressed aliens observing the proceedings. Her facial recognition software identified several as high-ranking members of various criminal organizations. This was it, the heart of the slave trade, the very targets she had been sent to eliminate. Just as they reached the processing station, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and the captives looked around in confusion and fear. The slavers, however, moved with practiced efficiency, clearly used to dealing with escape attempts or raids. In the ensuing chaos, Zara saw her opportunity. As guards rushed past, she slipped away from the group, her small size allowing her to duck unseen beneath consoles and behind equipment. She had mere moments before her absence would be noticed. Finding a secluded corner, Zora's eyes glowed briefly as she activated her long-range communication array. A tightly encrypted burst transmission was sent, carrying all the intel she had gathered so far. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a human stealth ship would receive the message, and the next phase of the operation would begin. Mission update complete, Zora thought as she made her way back to the Reeves family. Now, the real work begins. As Part 1 concludes, Zara has successfully infiltrated the heart of the galactic slave trade, gathering crucial intelligence and setting the stage for a massive human counteroffensive. The stage is set for the next phase of her dangerous mission, the slave ship. The processing center buzzed with a cacophony of alien languages and the harsh commands of the slavers. Zara, having successfully transmitted her initial intelligence report, rejoined the Reeves family just as they were being herded towards a new holding area. The alarms had ceased, but tension hung thick in the recycled air of the space station. "Where did you go?" whispered Lily, the youngest Reeves child, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Zara put on her best scared child expression. "I got lost in the crowd. I was so scared," she whimpered, her voice quavering perfectly. John Reeves placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder. "Stay close to us, little one. We need to look out for each other now." As they were marched through winding corridors, Zara's advanced sensors mapped every turn, every security checkpoint. Her eyes, indistinguishable from human ones, captured and analyzed the various alien technologies used throughout the station. Each piece of data was meticulously catalogued, building a comprehensive picture of the slavers' operations. They arrived at a vast hangar bay where a massive ship loomed, its hull scarred and pitted from countless voyages. Zara's database identified it as a Cronus-class slave transport, capable of holding thousands of captives in its cavernous holds. The Skarbzorn leader, whom Zara had dubbed Skarchops in her internal logs, barked orders to his subordinates. "Load them up. We've got a tight schedule to keep. The auction waits for no one." As they were herded up the boarding ramp, Zara noticed other groups of aliens being loaded onto the ship. Her facial recognition software worked overtime, identifying species from across the galaxy. Humans, Arcturians, Zeta Reticulans, and dozens of others, all bound for the same fate. Inside the ship, the captives were divided and locked into cramped cells. The Reeves family, along with Zara, found themselves sharing a space barely large enough for them to lie down. The metal walls thrummed with the ship's engines as they powered up. Maria Reeves pulled her children close, her voice barely a whisper. "Whatever happens, remember that we love you. Stay strong, stay together." As the ship lurched into motion, Zara activated her long-range sensors, penetrating the hull to get a read on their trajectory. They were heading deeper into uncharted space, far from the established trade routes where human patrols might intercept them. Days blurred together in the confines of their cell. Food, a gelatinous nutrient paste, was delivered twice daily through small slots. The air grew stale, filled with the sounds of weeping and occasionally the screams of those being disciplined by the guards. Zara used this time to gather more intelligence. She listened to the guards' conversations, building a picture of the slave trade's hierarchy and operations. She learned of the upcoming auction, a massive event where wealthy buyers from across the galaxy would bid on premium stock. On the 5th day of their journey, the monotony was broken by the arrival of a new group of guards. These weren't Zorn, but a species Zara's database identified as Valkyrians, tall, pale humanoids known for their telepathic abilities. One of the Valkyrians paused at their cell, its milk-white eyes scanning the occupants. Zara felt a gentle probe at the edges of her consciousness. The alien was reading their minds. For a moment, panic flared in her circuits. Her cover was about to be blown. But then her advanced defenses kicked in, projecting a false mental image of a terrified human child. The Valkyrian moved on, apparently satisfied. As soon as the danger passed, Zara began formulating a new plan. The presence of telepaths complicated things, but it also presented an opportunity. If she could find a way to manipulate their abilities, she might be able to sow confusion among the slavers. That night, as the Reeves family slept fitfully, Zara enacted the first stage of her plan. Using her advanced hacking capabilities, she tapped into the ship's communication systems. With careful precision, she began planting false messages and orders, subtly altering duty rosters and security protocols. By the time the ship's artificial day cycle began, small arguments had broken out among the crew. Guards showed up at the wrong posts, supplies were misplaced, and a general air of irritation permeated the vessel. Skarchops stormed through the prisoner deck, roaring at his subordinates. "What is going on here? If I find out any of you scum-sucking bottom feeders are responsible for this mess, I'll space you myself." Zara allowed herself a small hidden smile. Chaos was the friend of the Infiltrator, and she had just sown its seeds. As the journey continued, Zara's subtle sabotage escalated. She inserted contradictory orders into the ship's systems, causing malfunctions in life support and artificial gravity. Nothing catastrophic, she couldn't risk harm to the prisoners, but enough to keep the crew off balance and distracted. On the 10th day, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. Ethan, the older Reeves child, pressed his ear to the cell door. "I think we stopped moving," he whispered. Zara's sensors confirmed it. The slave ship had dropped out of faster-than-light travel. But they weren't at their destination. Something was wrong. The sound of running feet echoed through the corridors. Harsh voices shouted orders in various alien languages. The prisoners stirred, a mixture of hope and fear rippling through the holds. Suddenly, their cell door slid open. A young Zorn guard, his scales pale with fear, gestured frantically. "Out. Everyone out. We're evacuating the ship." As they stumbled into the corridor, Zara saw other cells being emptied. Prisoners and guards alike were rushing towards the escape pods. Through the viewport at the end of the hall, she caught a glimpse of what had caused the panic. A massive gravitational anomaly loomed in space, its swirling vortex pulling in debris and light. The slave ship shuddered, fighting against the pull of what Zara's databanks identified as an artificial black hole, a weapon of terrifying power. In the chaos of the evacuation, Zara made her move. As they neared the escape pod bay, she tripped, tumbling away from the Reeves family. In the confusion, no one noticed as she slipped down a side corridor. Zara raced through the emptying ship, her mechanical muscles allowing her to move at incredible speed. She reached her destination, the bridge, just as the last of the crew was abandoning their posts. Alone at last, Zara interfaced directly with the ship's computers. In seconds, she had full control. With deft manipulations, she overrode the evacuation protocols, sealing off certain escape routes and herding the evacuees, prisoners and slavers alike, towards specific pods. As the ship groaned under the strain of the gravitational anomaly, Zara initiated the final stage of her plan. The escape pods jettisoned, but not randomly. Using the ship's tractor beams, she carefully aimed each pod, sending the prisoners on a trajectory that would carry them to safety, while the slavers' pods were directed towards a nearby patrol route of human peacekeeping forces. With her task complete, Zara made her way to the last remaining pod. As she strapped herself in, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 2 of her mission was complete. The slave ship and its valuable intel were about to be swallowed by the anomaly, erasing any evidence of her interference. As her pod blasted free from the doomed vessel, Zara's communications array activated once more. A brief encoded burst transmitted the coordinates of the scattered escape pods to human forces waiting in the shadows. The pod's view screen showed the massive slave ship crumpling like paper as it was drawn into the maw of the artificial black hole. Zara's expressionless face betrayed no emotion, but deep in her core, a sense of accomplishment bloomed. The next phase of her mission awaited, and with it, the heart of the galactic slave trade. As her pod hurtled through space, Zara began to prepare for her greatest challenge yet, the auction that would bring together the most powerful and cruel beings in the galaxy. Little did they know, their reckoning was coming in the form of a child-sized harbinger of justice. The auction. The escape pod drifted through the vast emptiness of space, its lone occupant sitting motionless, eyes closed. To an outside observer, Zara might have appeared to be sleeping or perhaps in shock from the recent ordeal. In reality, her advanced systems were working at full capacity, processing the wealth of data she had acquired and preparing for the next phase of her mission. A soft beat from the pod's control panel roused Zara from her data-sorting trance. The nav system indicated they were approaching a massive space station, their original destination before the slave ship's demise. Zara's facial recognition software immediately began identifying the myriad of ships docking at the station. Luxury yachts, heavily armed frigates, and nondescript transports all converged on this hub of illegal activity. As her pod was drawn into one of the smaller hangar bays, Zara activated her most sophisticated infiltration protocols. Her skin shimmered almost imperceptibly as nanites rearranged her appearance. When the pod door hissed open, it wasn't a human child who stepped out, but a young Arcturian, a species known for their telepathic abilities and highly prized in the slave trade. A burly Cronan, his rocky skin glistening under the harsh hangar lights, approached with a scanner. Another stray from the Kronos transport. "Hemph, at least your valuable stock." Zara said nothing, keeping her eyes downcast in a perfect imitation of a cowed slave. The Cronin roughly grabbed her arm and led her through a series of winding corridors. Her internal mapping system worked overtime, creating a detailed layout of the station. They arrived at a vast chamber filled with hundreds of beings from across the galaxy. Some were clearly slaves, huddled in groups or confined in energy cages. Others moved about freely, their opulent attire and arrogant bearing marking them as buyers. Zara was shoved into a holding pen with other premium slaves, mostly telepaths and empaths from various species. As she scanned the room, Zara's systems went into overdrive. Her facial recognition software identified dozens of high-value targets, crime lords, corrupt politicians, and even a few supposedly respectable business tycoons. Each face was catalogued, along with any available data on their operations and weaknesses. A hush fell over the crowd as a towering figure took the stage. Zara's database identified him as Vox Talar, the self-styled auctioneer of the stars, and one of the most wanted criminals in 5 galaxies. Esteemed guests, Vox Talar's voice boomed, amplified by cybernetic implants. Welcome to the greatest show in the universe. Today's auction promises to be one for the record books. As the auction began, Zara witnessed the full depravity of the slave trade. Beings of all species were paraded on stage, their unique abilities and attributes callously discussed as if they were mere commodities. All the while, Zara's systems worked tirelessly, recording every transaction, every buyer, every credit exchanged. Hours passed, and finally, it was time for the premium stock to be presented. Zara was roughly pulled from the holding pen and shoved onto the stage. She stumbled convincingly, playing the part of a frightened child to perfection. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a real treat. Vox Talar announced. A young Arcturian at the peak of psychic potential. Imagine the possibilities, a personal thought reader, a living lie detector, or perhaps a unique addition to your telepathic security forces. The bidding was fierce. Numbers flashed across the holographic displays as wealthy buyers tried to outdo each other. Zara stood impassively, but her internal systems were far from idle. She began broadcasting on a subtle psychic frequency, one that only the most sensitive telepaths could detect. To those receptive minds, she sent images of chaos and destruction, slave rebellions, crumbling criminal empires, justice raining down from the stars. It was a carefully calculated risk, designed to sow seeds of unrest and paranoia among the gathering's most influential members. As the auction reached its frenzied peak, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Vox Talar's smug expression faltered as a subordinate whispered urgently in his ear. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," he announced, his voice betraying a hint of panic. "We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. The auction will resume shortly." But Zara knew better. Her long-range sensors had detected the approach of a massive fleet, the combined forces of the human alliance and their alien allies. The trap was sprung. Chaos erupted in the auction chamber. Buyers scrambled for their ships, slaves saw opportunities for escape, and security forces struggled to maintain order. In the confusion, Zara slipped away, her form shimmering once more as she reverted to her human appearance. She made her way through the panicking crowds, her inhuman strength allowing her to push through where others were trapped. Her destination, the station's central control room. As she ran, Zara activated her long-range transmitter, sending a highly encrypted message to the approaching fleet. The station's layout, security protocols, and the locations of high-value targets, all the intel she had gathered was transmitted in a matter of seconds. Reaching the control room, Zara found it in disarray. The station's commanders argued frantically, torn between defending their fortress and fleeing with whatever riches they could grab. None of them noticed the small child who slipped in through the chaos. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. Zara had interfaced with the station's main computer, her advanced hacking protocols easily overcoming its defenses. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off escape routes for the slavers while leaving paths clear for the slaves to reach the escape pods. Life support was rerouted, ensuring the safety of the captives while making things decidedly uncomfortable for their former masters. As the first shots from the approaching fleet rocked the station, Zara allowed herself a small smile. Her mission was nearly complete, but the most dangerous part was yet to come. The leaders of the slave trade were cornered, and cornered animals are always the most vicious. Zara's eyes glowed with an inner light as she prepared for the final confrontation. The fate of countless enslaved beings across the galaxy hung in the balance, and she was the linchpin upon which it all turned. The battle for the heart of the galactic slave trade was about to begin, and at its center stood a child who was so much more than she appeared. The escape. Alarms blared throughout the massive space station as chaos reigned. The approaching fleet of human alliance and allied ships had caught the slavers completely off guard. Zara, still in the central control room, watched through the station's external cameras as the first wave of smaller, agile fighters engaged the hastily scrambled defenses. With a thought, Zara interfaced deeper into the station's systems. She began a systematic shutdown of weapons platforms and shield generators, leaving just enough active to avoid suspicion. To the panicking slavers, it would appear as if their defenses were failing under the assault. In reality, Zara was ensuring a swift victory for the Liberation forces. Suddenly, the control room door burst open. A group of high-ranking slavers, led by the towering Vox Talar, stormed in. Their eyes widened in shock as they saw Zara, a mere child, standing calmly amidst the blinking consoles. "What is the meaning of this?" Vox Talar bellowed, his cybernetic voice modulator distorting with rage. "How did this little brat get in here?" Zara turned to face them, her expression unnaturally calm for a child in this situation. "Your reign of terror ends today," she stated, her voice carrying an authority far beyond her apparent years. One of Vox Talar's lieutenants, a serpentine Strathi, hissed in realization. "It's a trick. The human child, she must be the one Poe." Before he could finish, Zara moved with inhuman speed. In a blur of motion, she incapacitated two of the guards with precise strikes to vulnerable points in their alien anatomies. The others raised their weapons, but Zara was already among them, a whirlwind of calculated violence. Vox Talar watched in shock as his elite guards fell one by one to what appeared to be a human child. "What are you?" he growled, activating his personal energy shield. Zara paused, standing amidst the groaning forms of the fallen slavers. "I am justice," she replied simply, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "I am retribution for every being you've ever enslaved, for every life you've destroyed." With a roar of fury, Vox Talar charged, his massive form promising to crush the small figure before him. But Zara was no longer there. She moved with fluid grace, evading his attacks with ease. Her hands found weak points in his armor, disabling servo motors and tearing out critical components. As Vox Talar stumbled, his systems failing, Zara delivered a final precise strike to the base of his skull. The towering slaver crashed to the ground, unconscious but alive. He would face justice in the courts of the human alliance. With the immediate threat neutralized, Zara returned to the control console. The battle outside was turning decisively in favor of the Liberation forces. Across the station, slaves were rising up against their captors, aided by the strategic systems failures Zara had engineered. But her mission wasn't over yet. Deep in the station's databanks lay the true prize: complete records of the galactic slave trade's operations, its clients, its secret bases and transit routes. This information could dismantle the entire network. As Zara began the data transfer, a new alarm sounded. The station's reactor was destabilizing, a failsafe triggered by the most paranoid of the slave lords. They would rather destroy everything than let it fall into enemy hands. Zara's mind raced, calculating options. The reactor meltdown couldn't be stopped, not with the time she had left, but perhaps it could be delayed. Her fingers flew over the console, rerouting power, bypassing safety protocols. She bought time, precious minutes for the evacuation of the liberated slaves and the capture of key slave lords. A transmission came through on a secure channel. Operative Z, this is Admiral Chen. Status report. Mission successful, Admiral. Zara responded, her voice now crisp and professional. High-value targets secured. Data extraction in progress. But we have a problem. Reactor meltdown imminent. Recommend immediate evacuation of all friendly forces. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Understood. Operative Z extraction team is en route to your location. Prepare for immediate evac. Zara acknowledged the order, but she knew she couldn't leave yet. The data transfer wasn't complete, and every bit of information could save countless lives. The station shuddered as the first explosions rocked its lower levels. Zara stood firm, her eyes fixed on the progress bar of the data transfer. 85%, 90%, 95%. The door to the control room slid open once more. A team of heavily armed human soldiers rushed in, led by a grim-faced captain. "We need to go, now," he shouted over the din of alarms. Zara held up a hand, her eyes never leaving the console. 10 more seconds, she said calmly. The captain looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Zara's demeanor stopped him. He'd been briefed on the nature of this operative, but seeing her in person, a child with the bearing of a hardened soldier, was unsettling. Finally, the console beeped. Transfer complete. Zara disconnected from the system and turned to the extraction team. Mission accomplished. Let's go. They raced through the crumbling station, Zara's perfect recall of the layout guiding them through the safest routes. All around them, the sounds of battle were giving way to the chaos of evacuation. Liberated slaves were being ushered onto rescue ships, while captured slavers were secured in holding cells on Alliance vessels. As they reached the hangar bay, a massive explosion rocked the station. The deck buckled beneath their feet, and debris rained down from the ceiling. Without hesitation, Zara leaped into action, her enhanced strength allowing her to clear a path through the fallen wreckage. They reached the extraction shuttle just as another series of explosions tore through the hangar. The pilot gunned the engines, blasting out of the bay as flames licked at their heels. From the shuttle's viewport, Zara watched as the space station, once a monument to cruelty and greed, began to break apart. Explosions blossomed across its surface like deadly flowers, and then, in a final cataclysmic blast, it was gone. As the shuttle docked with the Alliance flagship, Zara allowed herself a moment of reflection. This battle was won, but the war against slavery and exploitation was far from over. The data she'd retrieved would strike a crippling blow to the galactic slave trade, but there would always be those who sought to profit from the suffering of others. Her mission, her purpose, was far from complete. But for now, as medical teams attended to the rescued slaves and intelligence officers began poring over the recovered data, Zara felt a small spark of something unfamiliar. It took her a moment to identify the emotion, so rarely experienced in her existence as a covert operative. It was hope. Hope for a galaxy where beings of all species could live free from the scourge of slavery. And she, this small, unassuming figure with the heart of a warrior and the mind of a supercomputer, would continue to fight for that future, one mission at a time. As the Alliance fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the scattered remains of the slave station, Zara's eyes flickered with determination. The next phase of her mission awaited, and she would be ready. The pursuit. In the days following the destruction of the slave station, the galaxy was abuzz with activity. News of the massive blow to the galactic slave trade spread rapidly, sparking hope in some and fear in others. For Zara, however, there was no time for rest or celebration. Aboard the Alliance flagship, Liberator, Zara stood before a holographic display, her young face illuminated by the swirling galaxies and blinking data points. Admiral Chen and a team of high-ranking officers watched in amazement as she effortlessly sifted through the vast trove of intelligence gathered from the slave station. Based on the data, We've identified 3 major hubs of slave trade operations, Zara reported, her voice steady and professional. However, our primary target should be this one. She zoomed in on a distant star system, previously unknown to Alliance intelligence. Admiral Chen leaned forward, his weathered face creased with concern. What makes this one special, Operative Z? It's not just a hub, sir. It's their central command. Zara's eyes gleamed with the reflection of the hologram. Take this out, and we cripple their entire network. The room erupted in excited murmurs, but Chen raised a hand for silence. It won't be easy. They'll be expecting us now, and this syndicate has resources we can't even imagine. Zara nodded solemnly, which is why I should go alone. The protests were immediate and vehement, but Zara stood her ground. I can infiltrate their defenses in ways your fleet can't, and if I'm captured, she left the implication hanging. After hours of debate and planning, a compromise was reached. Zara would go in first, paving the way for a full Alliance strike. As she prepared for departure, Chen approached her privately. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "You've already done more than we could have hoped for." Zara looked up at him, her eyes holding wisdom far beyond her apparent years. "This is what I was made for, Admiral. It's not just my mission, it's my purpose." Chen nodded, a mix of pride and sadness on his face. "Good luck, Operative Z. May the stars watch over you." Zara's infiltration of the Syndicate's central command was a masterclass in covert operations. She assumed multiple identities, hacked impenetrable systems, and maneuvered through a labyrinth of deception and danger. All the while, she gathered crucial intelligence and sabotaged key defenses, preparing for the Alliance's assault. But the Syndicate was not without its own resources. As Zara worked to dismantle their organization from within, she found herself pursued by a relentless hunter. Vexenor, the Syndicate's top assassin, had picked up her trail. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the sprawling complex of the Syndicate's headquarters. Vexenor, a shapeshifter of unparalleled skill, could be anyone anywhere. Zara's advanced systems were pushed to their limits as she sought to complete her mission while evading her pursuer. The chase culminated in a confrontation in the heart of the Syndicate's command center. Vexenor, having finally cornered his prey, was shocked to discover that his target was seemingly a child. "What manner of trickery is this?" the assassin hissed, his form shifting between various deadly configurations. Zara stood her ground, her combat systems fully engaged. No trickery, just justice long overdue. The battle that ensued was unlike anything the Syndicate had ever witnessed. Vexenor's shape-shifting abilities made him a formidable opponent, but Zara's advanced combat algorithms adapted to his every move. The command center was torn apart as the two engaged in a fight that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. In the end, it was Zara's unwavering focus on her mission that gave her the edge. As Vexenor launched a final, desperate attack, Zara used his momentum against him, sending the assassin crushing into the central computer core. The resulting power surge incapacitated Vexenor and provided Zara with direct access to the Syndicate's most guarded secrets, the Reckoning. As alarms blared and the complex went into lockdown, Zara worked feverishly to download every scrap of data she could. The full scope of the Syndicate's operations was laid bare before her. Every slave transaction, every corrupt official, every hidden base across the galaxy. Just as she completed the download, the first explosions rocked the facility. The Alliance fleet had arrived, their attack perfectly timed thanks to Zara's intelligence. Zara fought her way out of the crumbling command center, her small form darting through chaos and destruction. She encountered pockets of resistance, desperate Syndicate members fighting to the last, but nothing could stand in her way. As she reached the outer defenses, Zara found herself face to face with the supreme overseer of the Syndicate, a being of such evil that its very presence seemed to distort reality around it. "You," it growled, its voice resonating on frequencies that made Zara's systems shudder. "You dare to challenge us? We are eternal. We are inevitable. Zara stood tall, unflinching in the face of this cosmic horror. No, you are finished. What followed was a battle not just of physical prowess, but of wills. The Supreme Overseer unleashed psychic attacks that would have shattered the minds of most beings. But Zara's artificial consciousness, guided by an unshakable moral compass, stood firm. As Alliance forces breached the final defenses, Zara launched her ultimate attack. It wasn't a physical blow, but a data package, the sum total of all the suffering the Syndicate had caused, compressed into a single, overwhelming transmission. The Supreme Overseer reeled back, overwhelmed by the weight of its own evil. In that moment of weakness, Zara struck, using a hidden blade to deliver a precise, fatal blow. As the creature fell, its form dissolving into nothingness, Zara felt a wave of energy wash over her. The Syndicate's power was broken, its hold over countless enslaved beings shattered in an instant. In the aftermath, as Alliance forces secured the facility and liberated the slaves held there, Zara stood alone on a balcony overlooking the alien landscape. Admiral Chen found her there, staring out at the horizon. "It's over," he said softly. "Thanks to you, the galactic slave trade is no more." Zara turned to him, and for the first time, Chen saw something truly childlike in her expression, a mix of wonder and uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked. Chen knelt down, meeting her eyes. "That's up to you. Your mission is complete. You've earned your freedom, just like all those you've helped save." Zara was silent for a long moment, processing this new concept, freedom, a life beyond the mission. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like to help rebuild. There's so much healing to be done." Chen smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I think that's an excellent idea, and I know just where to start." As they walked back to the Alliance shuttle, Zara felt something new stirring within her complex systems, a sense of possibility, of a future filled with hope rather than conflict. The galaxy was entering a new era, one of recovery and reconciliation, and Zara, the child who was so much more, would be there to help guide it towards a brighter tomorrow. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying Zara towards her new life and new purpose, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The long night of slavery and oppression was over. A new dawn had begun.